Well, good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome. You all made it here in person, but you all made it here online, wherever the camera is, maybe here. But how's everyone doing? Doing good? Great. Well, first, I'm Hazel Zaman-Gonzalez. I'm an assistant professor here at Pacific Lutheran University in the Department of Social Work. I'm also this year's chair of the Furry Studies Conference Committee, and it is my pleasure to honor and welcome you all to the second annual Furry Studies Conference. Thank you all for being here. Before we begin, though, I want to first recognize that PLU is on the traditional lands of the Nisqually, Puyallup, Squaxin Island, and Steilacoom people. We acknowledge and respect the traditional caretakers of this land. They have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the indigenous peoples of this land and beyond. Now, as we begin this conference, I want to start by asking the furries in this room and those who are watching online, when did we become furries? In the past 2 days, as I thought about how I want to open up this conference, I immediately went to how I could discuss my own background in furry. However, as I started to write, I wrestled with the question, when did this all begin? For me. Was there a moment when I suddenly realized this was it, that I was a furry? So diving into this question more deeply, I looked back and considered everything potentially furry in my early life. For example, was it the moment that I would pretend to be a cat in elementary school? Or was it the time I watched The Lion King for the first time and really wanted a tail? Or was it when I created my first persona and then threw it away immediately because I was scared my parents would find out? Or was it when I came out to my friends as a furry, which coincidentally aligned with me coming out as trans? So all these things kind of, all questions that I think were important for me, but also questions for many of us that made us eager to really consider the possibility of researching and investigating furry, our own experiences, and how it feels to be a furry, and everything in between. But before we realize furry has become so important to us, and so it also is important to examine how furry has evolved in each regional and international community. For furry is not one voice, but a plural of collective voices that carry on a seemingly cohesive culture in the making. However, the furry study is not only a self-reflective inquiry into our experiences. As I considered this welcome speech, I also wanted to note the furry's relationship to the world, both past, present, and future, but most importantly, how has the world continued to respond to furry and the complex interactions between furry and sociopolitical landscapes globally. This is especially true now in the United States, where we currently meet, as furry has been targeted by policymakers who fear our imaginations may be a threat to law and order. Alongside such important social and political explorations, the study of furry may also venture towards the humanities, wherein cultural studies, studio art, queer and trans studies, the history, and continued works by furries are reflected upon deeply. These reveal astonishing connections to how we experience life through art, media, and performance, connections that not only impact the various fields we write from, but also the furry community itself. It is these thoughtful contemplations and sites of inquiry that draw us to events like these, curious considerations into what furry means to us, what furry feels like, how furry has impacted our lives and those around us, how furry has changed and transformed since its beginning, its impact in the world, and how those living within fascist states have had their ability to express themselves freely through furry hindered. Today, these considerations are woven throughout the presentations of our speakers, who all reside within different disciplinary and anti-disciplinary avenues, who all make a mess of their disciplines by bringing furry to their schools and departments, by each connecting furry to their scholarly expeditions, which have left me and the organizing committee of this conference truly inspired by your feral acts. Before I pass this off to our keynote speaker, I want to thank Pacific Lutheran University, the College of Health Professions, and the Department of Social Work for their tremendous support. I also want to thank the tech support here. Really thank you for everything you've done and everything in this room to make this possible. Thank you so much. I also want to thank Monash University, the Department of Design, for their financial support. I also want to thank the Anthropomorphic Animals Appreciation Association and the various societies, including Furries at Berkeley, for their active partnership. Thank you so much. I now have the pleasure to honor and to introduce our keynote speaker, who will share with us his stories and set the tone for today's conference, Rod O'Reilly. So Rod O'Reilly is the writing and performing name chosen by a humble and ordinary human being, and that human is a hazardous materials consultant by day, songwriter by night, and many other things in the hours in between. Much of his notoriety stems from the fact that he and his late husband, Mark Merlino, were among the first folks to ever organize meetups for what would become known as the Furry Fandom. And later, they would launch the first ever furry-themed fandom convention, ConFurence, in 1989. Please put your hands or paws together and welcome to the stage, Rod O'Reilly.
Thank you all very, very much for that introduction. I am indescribably humbled to have been asked to be here by you all and to take part of this. The great Robin Williams once did a gag about what it's like to be the father of an infant and all of the fun therein. And he talked about at one point getting so frustrated with what the child is throwing at you, perhaps literally, that you get to the point where you're just about ready to bat the child across the room when suddenly your child looks up at you and says, "Daddy." Oh. And then the child looks over at your dog and says, "Daddy." And your dog looks at you like, "and I don't have to send him to college." Kids look at things in a different way. Okay. So this is what we're talking about today, is how to look at things in a different way than is perhaps normal. And why we do that and how we go about that. Now, since this is a prestigious college, and this is a prestigious college presentation that I am giving about furry fandom, I am referring to this as my TEDdy talk. Let me get one thing out of the way first. You will notice something about me, okay? I am pushy with terms, okay? I am not the most politically correct person in the world, but I am pushy with certain terms, okay? I do not like the term humans and animals. This is dumb as far as I am concerned. It's like saying roses and flowers, okay? People will come and say, well, humans aren't animals. And I'm like, what are we, minerals? Okay? I specifically speak about that which is human and that which is non-human. Our species and other species. That is absolutely on purpose because we are red-blooded, chordate, family mammalia animals. Okay, am I right? Yes. Okay, absolutely. Okay, so having said that, let me say this. I want to acknowledge something very important. Okay, I want to acknowledge the elephant that is not in the room. Okay. And that would be my late life partner, Mark Merlino, Silas Sable. Okay? I stand on his shoulders for being here. Everything that I have done in fandom, I did for him, with him, or because of him. Okay? So we all owe a debt of gratitude to his memory. And yeah, you can applaud for that. A good chunk of what you will see going by here while I am speaking includes pieces of art that he either commissioned or that he actually drew. One of the great sadnesses of my life is that throughout his lifetime, he never, ever acknowledged his own abilities as an artist as much as he should have. So I have made it my mission since he has passed away for more people to become aware of his artwork, because they should, and of his original characters, because they should. Skiltare should be as well known as Protogens as far as I'm concerned, okay? We're working on that, okay? So, but we're not here to talk about history. We're here to talk about meaning. Why do we do this thing we do? All of us, every culture, every class, at every age of our lives, in every age of our history. Why do we take other species perfectly happy to go about their ordinary lives and put our words into their mouths to talk back to us. Usually, and this is the interesting part, about us. Us as a society, and even we as individuals. It's kind of like if you put your teddy bear on a chair and then laid back on a couch and said, "Well, Doc, it all started when I was in kindergarten." Why do we do this? We do this because we are compelled to. This is how our minds work. The band Rush, on their 1982 album Signals, had two very interesting songs. They're interesting individually, and they're interesting in that they had both of these songs on one album. One of the songs was called The Digital Man, and the other song was called The Analog Kid. Think about that for a minute, okay? Children have minds that tend to flow from thought to thought, data to data, object to object rather freely. Whereas when we grow up, we learn to compartmentalize things. Okay? We learn to compartmentalize the world. Everything is precisely what it is, and nothing more and nothing less. But when we're children, things are quite often not what they are. They're what we want them to be. When a child throws a dark blanket over a table and says that it's a fortress, that they've got to defend from the orcs, they're not pretending that table is a fortress. That table is a fortress. That's the power of imagination to shape our reality. But imagination is not running away from reality because imagination is ultimately bound with reality. How do I know this? Because of what imagination actually is and is not. Imagination is not the creation of non-existent data. Imagination is the combining of existing data in ways you hadn't thought of before. Think about it. You can't imagine a gopher with wings unless you know what a gopher is and you know what wings are. And so imagination is not trying to turn away from the real world. Imagination is trying to learn as much as possible about the real world, giving our minds as big a vocabulary as it can possibly deal with so that we have as many things as possible to play with. Even as grown-ups, we realize the power of imagination. But again, we teach ourselves to compartmentalize it. That is pretend, and that is real. And many of us out there in the real world are profoundly uncomfortable with people who get slippy-slidey between the two. Not me. Certainly not about myself, at least. I can be fully aware that that circle of mushrooms over there is those fungi doing their best to perform some resource allocation. While at the same time, I can imagine that that ring of mushrooms is a portal to a secret realm ruled by the elves. And I am perfectly at ease with that dichotomy. Since the first storytellers enthralled us around the campfire, they've been not only telling us stories of the day and of people we know and should know and events that were important and should be remembered, they have also told us stories about things which are not and never were. When we don't know all the things that we feel we need to know, imagination steps in to fill the gap. We create myths to connect the dots of our experience, to try to make sense out of the world around us and how it actually works when we don't have enough data right at hand. We create legends to give ourselves something bigger than ourselves that we can aspire to, something to look up to, a goal that we can move our lives towards, okay? Many of these myths and legends revolved around other living things we saw in the world around us. Why? Because they move. Our eyes are drawn towards motion. It's an essential part of the human mental experience. You've probably heard it said, and I think it's true, one of the biggest things that absolutely defined us as humans is when we stood up on two legs. Now, what's the advantage of that? The same advantage that mustelids and viverids have when they periscope. You can see further, okay? Oh, look, over there. There's some prey we might want to head over and hunt down. Oh, look, way over there, some lush green in the middle of that low grass. I bet there's water there. This is a gold mine for evolution. But we gave up some things along the way to that also. You add another 3 to 6 feet away from the substrate, and your sense of smell starts to atrophy. Because we became much more dependent on sight rather than hearing to look for things or to warn us of danger, because light travels a lot faster than pulses of pressure through the air, we became a lot less precise with our hearing. We still hear details relatively okay, but we're nowhere near as good as other species at using our ears to determine direction. And we suck at hearing with our feet. Okay. Some years ago, I read an article about a nature-oriented summer camp where they asked the children to try and gain a perspective on how other species might experience the world. They told the kids to get down on all fours and crawl through this medium to high grass, talking about what they smelled, talking about what they felt through their knees and their hands. Literally seeing what it's like to try to orient themselves while peering through the tall grass rather than over it. Okay. We, all of us, have this natural curiosity about how living things might experience the world if they're different from us. And what would it feel like to have that experience ourselves? Robert A. Heinlein was famous for stating that all science fiction stories arise from one of 3 simple phrases. What if only, and if this goes on. Okay. Every single human being ever who has ever had a single complete thought has at some point imagined, what if I was some other species? What would I be like? What would my world be like? How would I experience it? Why do we do these things? We are compelled to. Everyone does it. It always has. Who are the furry fans? We are the ones who notice that we do it. And we think it has a much deeper meaning than a lot of people give that credit for. Now I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to talk about people. More specifically, I'm going to talk about humans and rats. Some years ago, I saw a video talking about an experiment that was performed at university in a biology department regarding rat society. What they did was they created a small biodome and they set up a rat colony in there, providing them with food and basically letting them go about their business within an enclosed dome. And then they observed what happened. What they did was they allowed the rats to breed freely, such that the population, because they didn't have to do an awful lot of work to get their food, the population continued to grow. Now, here's an interesting thing. They did not starve them. As the population continued to grow, they increased the food supply. But here's the thing. The rats started getting in each other's way. They started running into each other a lot. They had to go further to get to where the food was because they had to go around other rats more often. They started bumping into each other more. And the rat society, which had been largely peaceful and largely cooperative and so forth, the social structures started to break down. They started getting surly towards each other. They started getting greedy. They started forming little groups. that would grab food from themselves and beat up anybody else who tried to come by and get the food. And as the population increased, even though the food supply was there for them, the problems increased, and it started becoming violent. And this was rather, a nasty thing to do to a set of animals. I'm not going to kid myself, not a set of another species. But what it showed was very interesting. Is anything that I'm talking about even slightly sounding familiar here? Okay. Maybe, just maybe, part of the problem with our current human experience is that there's too much human experience. We are all over each other, day in, day out, and it's just so much of our own species to have to deal with. Maybe part of the reason that anthropomorphism is a growing part of our human experience is simply the fact that we are growing increasingly tired of each other, but we want to talk to somebody. Humans have, so far as we can tell, a seemingly unique capacity for loneliness and antisocial surliness at the same time. Every one of us wants to be respected as a unique individual, but none of us wants to be a lonely outcast. There's a great line, for the few of you here who may have seen it, in the movie Elio, where one of the aliens says to our hero, "You are unique." And unique can sometimes feel like alone. But you are not alone. Do you want to make the world a better place? I think it's maybe a time to step back and gain a little more perspective on other humans out there. I'm sorry, Elon, but I am going to talk about empathy. I am on the autism spectrum. I can't help it. I do it automatically all day long. Okay. I'm going to present to you a philosophy that I've been working on for some time. I call it the broccoli theory. Okay. And it is mine. Okay. I'm going to present you with some basic, I think, irrefutable facts. And then I'm going to show you where I think logic takes them to. Okay. Basic facts. There are people out there who like broccoli. They think it's delicious. There are people out there who despise broccoli and can't believe other human beings would actually willingly put it in their mouths. And there are people out there who are meh about broccoli, okay? They can take it or leave it. They don't actually seek it out, but it's not going to make them sick if they have to eat it. Fine, okay? Now, here is what I'm going to posit for these three situations, okay? Number one, none of these people are wrong, okay? They think what they think, they feel what they feel, but none of them are wrong about it. Number two, none of these people are right about it, okay? They think what they think, they feel what they feel, but there's no rightness about it, all right? Number three, any one of these three people could talk all day long about why they think they feel what they feel. And I can almost guarantee you that it's not going to budge either of the other two from their opinion at all, okay? Number four, I'm losing track, okay? None of these people are under any compulsion to ever explain why they feel the way they feel to either of the other two or to themselves. I used to drive myself bananas trying to figure out, why do you like that piece of artwork? and this other piece of artwork that's so similar, you're like, maybe. Why do you like that kink? And this other kink that's so similar instantly squicks you. That makes no sense at all. I was trying desperately to get some kind of a logical through line through my own mentality, such that it all became a consistent thing. And then I figured out why. My feelings are my feelings. Their feelings are their feelings. No compulsion at all to explain it. And number 5, regardless of where you sit regarding broccoli, when you die, despite all of your best efforts throughout your entire life, there will be people living who feel differently about broccoli than you did. Okay? And the sooner you get all of these 5 concepts through your head and make them part of your being, not only will you go far towards your own peace of mind, you will actually go far towards making this a more polite and peaceable world. More than any way that I can imagine. Now, please understand, okay, I am not talking about moral choices here, okay? This is not about things lives depend on, or how people should act towards one another, violence versus nonviolence, and all of that. I'm talking about taste. I'm talking about what Cy Sable used to call aesthetics, your own vision of what is beautiful and what is good and what is desirable, okay? Does pineapple belong on a pizza? Any answer that you give to that question is correct for you. But so many people, when they discovered their tastes, their aesthetic, they think they stumbled across a new principle of physics. There's a subtle but important change of language that I want everyone here to be aware of, okay? And I want you to think about this. Take it away with you, okay? That music is terrible. Wrong. You don't like that music. That movie is great. Wrong. You like that movie. Subtle difference in words, vast difference in meaning. It's so common in our public discourse, but it's so destructive and so wrong. You have to own your personal viewpoint. Why wouldn't you? Well, because stating that it's your viewpoint can be a scary, lonely thing. If you're saying something that's an indisputable fact, if you're telling people the sky is blue, then no one sensible is going to disagree with you. If you state that something is personal to yourself, you might find that you don't have the backing of the general populace behind you. People might try to argue with you about it. You might feel that you have to defend it. But that's the thing. Guess what? You don't. If the entire world likes a particular kind of coffee and you don't, they are not right or wrong, and neither are you. So yes, it is perfectly fine to like boobs on a bird character, or don't. And with that abrupt gear shift, back to furries. One of the most eye-opening experiences I had gaining new perspective is when I started role-playing anthropomorphic characters online. Now, there's a long-standing cliche joke about queer guys playing female characters online to try and flirt with straight men. Well, guess what? I discovered that playing a female character online is a great way to pick up girls. I also discovered a lot about what it feels like to have straight men coming at you from all sides, even when you ask them nicely to back off a bit. It was at times more than a bit scary, Okay? It was very eye-opening. And speaking of female characters, a word to self-stated non-furry critics out there. Please, no, they are not strangely sexualized cartoon characters. You think they are sexy. Grow a pair and say so. And no, I am not going to worry about the political correctness of all this, okay? If you are not aware, for those of us who have been around a while, political correctness is basically a fancy way of saying fashionable politeness. I grew up in Canada. I find politeness to be very, very important. I have never cared much about fashion. Are they challenged? Are they disabled? Or are they cripples? Am I on the autism spectrum? Am I neurodivergent? Am I neurospicy? Or am I an annoying dork? Whatever. So long as you speak to me with some degree of respect and empathy, as you would wish me to give to you, we're going to get along just fine, okay? But while I'm up here, let's talk about terminology, okay? Am I a furry? Are any of us? Okay? I used to be very, very pushy about the fact that in my mind, I was not a furry. People ask me, are you a furry? I'd say, no, I'm not a furry. Mickey Mouse is a furry. Bugs Bunny is a furry. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are furries, scaly or not. I am a furry fan. Why did I do that? Because at the time, I thought it was exceedingly important to recognize the creation and the creators versus the celebration of the creations and the creators. Okay? But then guess what? There's been a generational shift. I've been at this long enough that there has been a full-fledged generational shift. We are the creators, okay? When I was starting out, don't you love sentences that start that way? Back in the day, we were all about things that other people had made, okay? Big, famous names, okay? Let's face it, many of them weren't that desperately concerned about their fandom. They just wanted to put groceries on the table and they knew they could draw. So guess what? There they went, okay? Terrific. Along the way, we started creating our own stuff. And we started turning to our own stuff more than the stuff that they were creating. And guess what? Well, I'll put it this way, okay? I used to joke that if it was true, and it's a big if, because believe me, there was a lot more nuance on this than you probably have heard, but if it was true that Hollywood, that great big word, who knows what it means, would not hire us no matter how talented we are because we were self-identified as furries, then for the sake of our own economic survival, we had no choice but to take it over. Guess what? See Netflix lately? Okay. I offer you one word, Vivzipop. Okay? Someone who literally created an entire hurricane of fandom behind them before Hollywood noticed them. By the time Hollywood say, hey, over here, they were already up and running to the point that so many people would be jealous of, okay? And take a quick look. You'll find the next ones waiting in line, okay? They're all over the place. I can give you names, Okay. So, are we furries? Damn right we are. Who created these characters? We did, and they rock. So why do we do these things? Why the hell wouldn't you? Thank you. I'm a little ahead of schedule, but I don't want to, believe me, I do not want to make us miss coffee. So, I'd be more than happy to take any questions from the crowd out there if they're. Suffice it to say, this is something I thought deeply about for a very long time. Okay, so I do have I have my opinions on so many things out there.
And for the sake of the virtual attendees, if you can please go up to the microphone so that they can hear you as well for your questions.
Thank you, I forgot. Oh, yes, and how would I look at the questions from the virtuals? Is that possible?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, so just let me know whenever you like. So, are there questions from the floor out here? Go on up. Thank you very much for being brave. I appreciate it.
Definitely nervous. Definitely nervous.
You're nervous.
Oh, yeah. Very, very impressed. So I did try to come as prepared as possible, so I did have some questions. I'm just going to start with one. I have been thinking about furry a lot, and the ways that we sort of comport ourselves and all that jazz, but the main question is, how might different furry scenes learn from each other? Because it's very regional. Yes, seems like one monolith, but it's a million different friend groups that are all making something that seems like one thing, but everybody's always bringing something from the table that's different. So how can we learn from each other as different weird groups?
You just sort of created the space yourself for that because you're interested in it. That's the answer, is have an interest in how. I'm desperate to find out how they do furry stuff in Asia. I've never been to an Asian con. I would love to. I've never been to a continental European con. I've been to a couple in Britain, but I have not been to a continental one yet, and I want to. I have not been to any of the Latin American furry conventions, but I have literature from all of these things, and of course, YouTube being YouTube, I have lots of video from all of these things, and guess what? They're fascinating. I mean, in little subtle ways, you do notice things. Someone was just talking earlier about a Chinese convention, which is very, very small. And for what they have a convention in Red China, okay? Think about that for a minute. But they apparently their booths over there for their dealer's room are what over here we would call small houses. Okay, they're gigantic constructions that they create. You've probably noticed if you've ever seen footage from fur conventions in Asia that they have a particular subtle, different, but very distinctive way of designing fursuits. Okay, you can tell an Asian fursuit when you see one, particularly in the face. Okay, and that's fascinating. I'd love to put a study together about why specifically. Well, I know some of the answer, okay? It depends on furry and animation are inextricable, okay? There's no two ways about that. Furry, by definition, is not specifically a cartoon fandom, but guess what? Furry fandom came out of cartoon fandom. So animation is always going to be a part at the back of people's minds for when you have a furry culture, which means things like, well, for one thing, it's the old joke I had for a long time is that no, furries aren't people who want to be animals. Furries are people who want to be cartoon characters. Makes much more sense. But what you think of as an anthropomorphic character is going to be heavily influenced by what region of animation you grew up with and what era of animation you grew up with, okay? An awful lot of what the furry fandom had when I was starting had, well, actually, 3 primary sources. That would be Warner Brothers cartoons, Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and Disney's 9 Old Men. Okay? How many people in this room are familiar with the group known as the 9 Old Men? Not many, okay? Look it up. Google it, okay? Disney 9 Old Men, okay? They were the core of Disney animation. There were a lot more animators there, but there was this specific brain trust of 9 guys, and it was, I'm paid to say it at the time, guys, who hung around with Disney, so we referred to them as these 9 old men who were constantly on his butt. So much of what we think of as anthropomorphic characters specifically came out of those guys' pens, okay? So more people should know that because, believe me, the designs of what we think of as American fursuits, direct line from Disney's 9 Old Men. I guarantee it. You see some of their original sketch designs, you'll say, okay, yeah, all right. I remember when Zootopia came out and Disney brought out the official Nick and Judy suits that have been around at the parks ever since. And somebody online made the comment, we have reached the point where it is difficult to tell the difference between an official Disney character costume and a well-made fursuit. And it was, okay? I could think of, the instant I saw that, I'm like, I can think of 5 different fursuit makers who could have made something exactly like that. Back in the day, I remember when there were fursuit makers who were making stuff much better than what some of the theme parks out there had for costumes running around, believe me. So back to your question, it's simply, of course, the obvious answer is the internet, because there is an ability. I can't physically make it to all these conventions that I want to make it to, but I can sure as heck see film from them. Every one of them, usually within about an hour of when the thing finishes on Sunday. Somebody's got something up. So I visit, and not just conventions, fur meets, house parties, what have you, okay? Or animation that people are working on, okay? I love to see stuff like that. I loved when people put up their storyboards. I love when people put up their Leica reels, whatever, you know? So have an interest, which I think most of us already do, in what people are doing in other parts of the world, because they are going to put their personal spin on it, based on their location, based on their age, based on their economic standing, okay? Not every furry out there goes to college. I'm sure they'd all love to, but not all of them can afford it. But that doesn't make them any less furries if they're into this stuff. I hope that points towards what you were saying. Any other questions out there? Okay, yeah. You first, and then you. So go ahead.
Hold on, let me.
You can take it off the stand. Whatever's.
I can just kind of. There you go. Okay, hi.
Hello.
It's an honor. I'm a writer. I study child psychology at Berkeley, so I loved hearing about your anecdotes. I was just wondering, within that vein, I can kind of point it down. What it's been like kind of seeing the new generation of kids who are born into a world where there's already an established furry fandom, because I just think it's really interesting. Seeing how the fandom kind of cyclically reinvents itself. And I think we're getting into the first generation of kids that have a really like defined idea of what the fandom is and its place in our culture, and what that's been like just kind of watching them grow up in that and reinvent it.
I'll
Thank you.
dovetail off what you're talking about there. An even more interesting thing to me is we're reaching the first generation of furry kids who are being raised by furry parents. Okay? That's new, okay? Now, I joke at people, but it is 100% true. Furry fandom is not new, okay? Furry fandom has probably been around since somebody first decided to draw Anubis on the wall of a pyramid, and somebody said, whoa, he's hot. Okay. What is new, like so much of our human culture right now, is communication, okay? Well, I'm not bragging here, okay, I promise, but just, people would come up to us and to Mark and me and say, hey, you guys started Furry Fandom, and we would both immediately say, no, we didn't. Furry Fandom started itself. We got Furry Fandom talking to itself, okay? We said, hey, you're a furry, he's a furry, why don't you two talk to each other? And things came out of that, okay? So what is new is that, again, things that there is nothing, absolutely nothing out there which has caused a greater growth and flourishing of furry fandom more than the internet. There's a reason that they both started rising at the same time, okay? Not just because furries use the internet, but because by and largely, let's face it, furries built it, okay? So in other words, what I'm getting at is the first generation of kids growing up with furry fandom existing is the same first generation of kids growing up with the internet existing, okay? We now have full-fledged adult parents who were born after the invention of the internet. So they have never known a world which did not have the internet, okay? It is that much a fabric of their lives, or part of the fabric of their lives, okay? So, as someone from a previous generation myself, that's that is scary. You get older, you get slower, but the world is getting faster. That's frightening. I don't know how to describe it to people, but back in my day, when I was younger than some of the folks in this room, we could still do a lot of the stuff that we do these days, but it took a hell of a lot longer to do it. We didn't, virtual reality, heck, we didn't have mucks back then. We had storyboards. And before my generation, we had people corresponding back and forth in the letter columns of magazines. And by corresponding, I mean they were role-playing by writing into their favorite they'd write into Modern Rocketry as a character. And then somebody else would write back and respond to that in the next month as a different character. And they had stories going this way until the magazines told them, would you please knock it off? Okay? So we were doing the same thing, just a lot slower, okay? And then Mux came along, and it was a lot faster. It was how quickly can you type? Excuse me. Now we have VR chat, and it's how quickly can you talk, okay? Things get faster. But, for someone of my generation, it's hard to keep up with it, and it can be a bit scary. But, so I'm jealous of the younger generation that can, keep up with that. But, at the same time, it is important to keep perspective. It's important to remember that just because everything is available instantly, that everything instant is not necessarily everything good. Can I put it that way? And that maybe slowing down and giving some thought to things from time to time might be advisable. That's, that's the challenge to try and give to the new generation. Now, as far as new furries, my gosh, I'm waiting for the first 10-year-old to get a deal with Netflix, okay? Okay. Look what I did on these Post-it notes, okay? Here's $1 million, I joke, but, it's fully possible, It's amazing the creativity that can get into. And I don't think there's too much of it. I do not think there's too much of it. If anything, there's too much holding it back, okay? I'm not going to get political right now because it depresses me, but suffice it to say, there's a lot that's holding creativity back at the moment, and it's incredibly stupid. But, I will say that I'm resisting the urge to get too political, but suffice it to say that really a lot of the biggest problems right now are old farts, okay? Not this one in particular, I'm going to be selfish and say, but I have much better hope for the next generation. I really do. Because they talk so much to each other that I think they get each other a little better. And if you actually poll them, a lot of them do seem to get each other a lot better. It's just that the old farts still have the reins, and they're not letting go of them very soon or very well. They're kind of complaining about it, and while they complain, they hurt a lot of people. There's no two ways about it. While they complain, they hurt a lot of people. Okay, to try and prove the point to each other. Hey, we're the good ones. But I have a lot of hope for the next set to maybe make more sense. So long as, okay, here's the little warning. So long as we don't get into thinking that there's few things more dangerous than thinking that anything that gets you clicks is good. Okay, including being violent to other people. I'll leave it at that. Okay, I don't like a world where people will do things. Oh, hey, this is going to make me famous. I'm going to go hurt somebody. Not good. Okay, there are better ways to become famous. And of course, why do you want to become famous? Well, you want to become famous because you're worried about being lost in the crowd. Remember what I said. We want to be unique individuals, but we don't want to be lonely, okay? So we need things like Furry Fandom to help people not be lonely, because we can help them be not lonely without having to hurt other people to get, in other words, you can snarl all day about, oh, they're just doing all that nasty stuff to get attention. Well, fine. Drop the other shoe. How do we get them the attention they need without them having to hurt other people? That's the challenge. And that, I think, is important. And I happen to very selfishly think that Furry Fandom is very good at that. Thank you. You, sir. You had,
Well, before
oh, sorry.
I want to get one online question. So
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My bad.
I'm going to ask you right here, if that's okay. So online, someone asked, have you noticed an event or series in events that have triggered a shift in the fandom, where it's changed in a noticeable or measurable way?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I kind of hinted at it in my talk there. The biggest shift has been the shift away from IP and towards OCs. That's absolutely, there's nothing bigger that has happened in furry that I can think of more so than that. We are literally direct competition. I mean this room, we are direct competition for Disney and DreamWorks and Sony and everybody else, okay? Direct competition, okay? And they know that. They're scared, okay? They're trying to figure out what to do with it. There are reasons why there was so much nudge, nudge, wink, wink Are you watching us furries in the advertising for Bad Guys 2 and Zootopia 2 and so forth, okay? Okay? They're like, are you watching? Yeah, we're watching. Impress us. Okay? Because guess what? We've got other people sitting right over here with a MacBook creating stuff that can give you a run for your money, okay? So that's the biggest thing. And, you know, beyond even just animators, writers, you know, fursuit makers. I mean, for crying out loud, there are people, they're hiring fursuit makers to make sports mascots now, because guess what? We do it better. Okay. Now you, sir. And don't let me go beyond on time.
I'll give you a warning.
Thank you. Hi,
Well, good morning. And first off, thank you for coming all this way to be here. I really appreciate you speaking and sharing your perspective. As somebody who has been in this fandom, or at least the modern iteration of this fandom since the outset, it's kind of an open-ended question, but how would you what did I write? How do you feel about, or maybe interpret, the way that the fandom has grown from a humble room party to an international community, or even bordering on a subculture? And also, and I know we've kind of covered a lot of that over the last few questions, but do you feel like anything along the way, anything valuable, any core values have been lost along the way that we could gain, we could regain or kind of reapproach?
Yeah, in order, the number one thing that I think surprised a lot of us, not just Cy Sable and myself, but a lot of us, when we started hosting this, was the number of people who came out and said, wait, there are other people besides me who draw this stuff? They didn't know, okay? Because they'd never managed to track down where they could show this to other people, okay? I always talk about this, Rodney, broken record time, because I realized that what an important part of our psyche this was back when, in 1977, when Disney came out with The Rescuers. And I was just absolutely awestruck by this movie. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with these feelings that I've got. I desperately want to jabber about everything I think about this movie and these characters and the story and the adaptation and blah, blah, blah with somebody, and I don't have anybody to do that with. And I realized with the gift of hindsight later on that I was looking for fandom. But at the time, I had no idea what a fandom is. I had never heard of such a thing. Star Trek fandom, or anything. Star Wars fandom was barely getting started in 77 because the movie had just come out. Everybody went bananas about it, but it took a while to get organized as a fandom. Okay? About the biggest thing that was going still at that point was Star Trek fandom, but I didn't know anything about it. So the fact that people discovered that there was more people like them, that's the reason that it's grown, is because there are so many people who want to think about, like I said, what would something be like if it was not quite like us, but somewhat like us? You know, we've said for years and years and years that the thing that is special about anthropomorphism as a line of thought is that it combines the familiar with the exotic, okay? If we have too much familiarity in our lives, if things are too much the same as they've been, we get bored. If we have too much exotic, too much new, too much that's unfamiliar, we get scared. But if you can get something that has a little bit of both, it's got stuff you recognize and stuff that's weird to you, that's awesome. So there is this natural human proclivity towards having that. It's just now we're talking to each other and we discover just how natural it is. So yeah, it's a subculture, but it may not be that sub. Okay? And things we've lost. I I'd say, on the one hand, I joke about, haha, Hollywood, look at us, here we are, and all this stuff. But at that same time, somewhat old fart talk here, but I don't want us to forget that some of that IP that we started with is pretty awesome, okay? That's why I push about the 9 Old Men at a lot of people, and about Walter Lantz, and some of the people. How many people here have actually seen some of the, what would be called classic Warner Brothers cartoons? The Warner Brothers shorts. Okay, a few, okay. Back me up here. They're funny as hell, okay? And they're very well written, very well animated, and some of them smart as heck, okay? Here, lesser one. How many people have seen some of the actual 1960s animated Hanna-Barbera cartoons? Huckleberry Hound. Okay, again, very funny, very well edited. They're great education for editing, okay, for how to make jokes funny. They're very limited animation, but the writing is great, and the editing is snappy as hell, okay? And it works, okay? I don't want to lose that, okay? I want people to be aware that even though now we've moved beyond that to where we can do a lot of this stuff ourselves, and we should, and we are, the old stuff was good for a reason, and we became fans of it for a reason, okay? So I don't want to turn up my nose at it completely, okay? No, none of us like Disney. Disney are a bunch of corporate schmucks. I will say that out loud. Now I'm in a lot of trouble. But Disney's product, the stuff that the creative people who work at Disney make, is what an awful lot of this is based on for a reason, okay? And we should not forget that. Any more online?
Yes.
Okay.
Another question is, we now have amazing organizations like Fur Science and Furry Studies Conference. Are there any other types of furry organizations that you'd like to see or like to see be created?
Wow. I never expected something like Fur Science to exist, or this. So, wow, where would we take it from here? Throughout his life, Cy Sable was fascinated by fans. He always said, I am a fan of fans. Because the very concept, first Star Trek convention he ever went to, he saw the set of the bridge of the Enterprise. And he said, wow, you got that set of the bridge of the Enterprise. That's really cool. How'd you get that from Paramount? And they told him, oh no, the original set burned down. This is something that a bunch of fans made. He's like, wait, a bunch of fans made this? This looks better than what was on TV. He said, yeah. Well, did you get paid for that? Well, no, they just kind of met together on weekends. So you took your own time, you weren't being paid for it, and you made this. Well, yeah. Why would people do that? Okay. He was, that question, that open-ended question, why are we fans of things? What does it mean in terms of pure neurological firings up here? What does it mean to be a fan of something, as opposed to someone who is using it to put bread on the table, okay? Because quite often, let's face it, we're not. All right? But it is desperately important to us. What does that mean? I would like to see a study about that, because he was never able to answer that question. We got towards it, but we was never able to answer that question. I don't know. I'll throw this out there like a bomb, but we're getting to the point where it's becoming so ubiquitous that, I don't know, maybe it's time for a fursuit makers guild? And I'm not just for exchanging knowledge, although that's very important. I'm talking about literally about negotiating prices and stuff, because as I said, I was not joking, okay? There are professional organizations that are coming to fursuit makers and saying, do us something, you're better than these other people that we've had before, okay? Particularly when you have to do something that's specific to a particular person, okay? So I don't know, maybe it's time to start getting some negotiating power. Thought. All right. Well, I want to thank you all very, very much. I will be around all day, and I'm going to be peppering some of you with questions when you're doing your presentations. So, and I will be around during the coffee clutch, although I'm having tea. So there. So thank you all very much. And if you have anything else you'd like to chat about, I'd love to meet every single one of you. And thank you all very, very much for your time. Blessed be.